I used to think grief would shrink with time. That if I kept moving, across cities, across continents, it would wear itself out like a storm. But it hasn't. What's changed is how I carry it. From DC to Patagonia, I've met people who wear their scars like stories. Marcus, who built a company from the rubble of betrayal. Camila, who stirred ash into sweetness and turned grief into a quiet kind of hospitality. Mateo, who danced on salt and reminded me how to laugh again. Ana Luisa, who forgave her own flight and taught others to return to their bodies. Santiago, who led me to the edge of the world and said nothing, because silence said it best. Each of them gave me something to carry. Not to replace Elizabeth, but to walk with her differently. Less like a wound, more like a thread. And so, I kept going. I arrived in Lisbon on a soft gray morning. The kind of morning that felt like it was waiting to be written. Fog curled between red rooftops like breath held too long. The air smelled like river wind and baked sugar, like stories still warm from the oven. This city was always hers. Not in the way New York belonged to us, or how we fantasized about Kyoto or Cairo. Lisbon was different. Intimate. Longed for. It was where she wanted to begin. She used to read aloud from travel books in bed, circling paragraphs with a yellow pen, Alfacinhas, tiled facades, tram 28 weaving like a golden thread through the hills. She spoke about Lisbon like it was a poem she'd almost memorized. "It's the kind of place," she once said, "that forgives you for being slow. I want to be slow for a while." It wasn't just the architecture or the coast or the father singers tucked into candlelit taverns. It was the melancholy. The ache. That Portuguese word she made me learn to pronounce, saudade. "It's grief," she explained. "But gentle. Like missing something you never quite had. Or had, and lost, but still want to thank." She said Lisbon felt like that. A place where you could miss someone and not have to explain it. A city that didn't demand you move on, only that you move with. We were supposed to live here for a year. That was the plan. After graduation, after jobs stabilized, after whatever version of adulthood we thought we needed to earn. A sabbatical, we called it. We'd write, she'd finally start her novel, and I'd teach English part-time or work at a bookstore. We even picked out our favorite neighborhood on Google Maps. Graca. For the view, she said. For the light. When she got sick, the Lisbon dreams didn't die right away. They held on, even after everything else slipped through our fingers. She kept guidebooks by the bed. Left sticky notes in the margins. On her last good day, she made me promise, not to visit, not just to remember, but to take her there, in some way. "Even if I'm not breathing," she said, "just go. And breathe for both of us." So I came. With her compass around my neck and the memory of her voice tucked behind my ribs. Not for answers. Not for closure. But for her. For the girl who believed in beauty even when her own body betrayed her. For the writer who dreamed of tiled balconies and quiet cafes and lemon pastries eaten on steps worn soft by strangers' stories. For the promise we made. I came to Lisbon to keep it. I met Ricardo on a Tuesday that smelled like rust and coffee. I'd been wandering the back streets near the Santa Apollonia station, half lost, half looking for a place to be, and stumbled into an open-air depot where Lisbon's old yellow trams go to sleep. I stood at the chain-link fence, watching as one was wheeled inside with a metallic groan, thinking about how Elizabeth once said she wanted to ride every tram line in the city, just to see where people were going. That's when Ricardo saw me. He was under one of the cars, grease on his arms, a cigarette tucked behind his ear like punctuation. In his late 60s, maybe older, with eyes that looked like they'd seen too many days and hadn't grown tired of any of them. "You looking for a ride, or just something that still works?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "Maybe both," I said. He laughed and waved me inside. Ricardo wasn't supposed to let anyone back there. Too many rules, too much liability. But I think he could tell I wasn't there to cause trouble. Maybe he saw the weight I was carrying. Or maybe he just needed someone to talk to. He showed me around like the place was a museum. explained how each tram had its own mood, how some hummed louder in winter, how others leaned into corners like dancers too eager to turn. "They're stubborn," he said, patting one. "But they remember how to move." Over coffee from a dented thermos, we sat on a crate beside an old spare motor and talked. He told me he'd been working on trams since he was 17. "The city changed," he said. "But these? They still sing the same songs on the tracks." His wife, Amalia, died 5 years ago. Cancer. Fast. Quiet. He still wore his wedding band on a chain around his neck. Said he couldn't take it off. "She liked the sound it made when it tapped my chest," he said. Said it reminded her I had a heart under all the silence. Every Sunday, he still goes to the bakery she loved. Buys a single pastel de nata. Leaves it on the bench near their old apartment. She never liked flowers. He shrugged. Said sweets were a better way to be remembered. When I told him about Elizabeth, he didn't flinch. Just nodded, like he already knew. "We don't stop loving people just because they stop showing up for dinner," he said. "We just learn to sit at the table differently." Before I left, he handed me a tram token, one of the old ones, copper, worn smooth. "Keep moving," he said. "Even if it's just in circles. That's still movement." And then he turned back to the tram, wrench in hand, humming to himself. As I walked back through the winding streets of Alfama, the token heavy in my pocket, I kept turning Ricardo's words over in my mind. We just learned to sit at the table differently. It struck something deep. This idea that love doesn't vanish when the person does. It just changes seats. Shifts its weight. I realized I'd been trying so hard to not feel the absence, to silence it, numb it, outpace it. But maybe absence is part of the table now. Maybe grief has earned its place. I thought about how Ricardo still leaves pastries on that bench. Not for closure. Not for some poetic ritual. Just because she mattered. Just because some habits are another way of saying, "I remember." Maybe I didn't have to outrun the ache. Maybe I just had to make room for it. That night, I took the tram back to my guest house. Sat by the window. Let the hills rock me like a lullaby. And for the first time since arriving in Lisbon, I didn't feel like a stranger. I felt like someone who had been invited to stay. The morning after I met Ricardo, I woke early. Not from noise. Not from nightmares. Just a quiet tug in my chest, like something was asking me to pay attention. Lisbon at dawn is a different city. Slower. Tender even. The cobblestones still damp from the night air, the first tram whining in the distance like it's reluctant to wake. I walked with no real plan, just a compass around my neck and Ricardo's words echoing in my head. "If you're the kind of man who listens to stories, go visit the shop on Rua das Flores." The third green door past the postbox. It was barely 8 a.m. when I found it, unmarked, narrow, the kind of door most people would walk past without a second glance. But I heard something inside. Not music. Not voices. Just the soft pull of thread through paper and a page being turned with reverence. I knocked. No answer. I tried the handle. It creaked like a confession. The smell hit me first, glue, old wood, ink, and something herbal, like thyme, maybe. The shop was dim, lit only by sunlight sliding through a half-drawn curtain. Books were everywhere. Not the kind you buy. The kind you inherit. Spines faded, corners curled, covers that looked like they'd been held by 100 different hands with 100 different intentions. At the back table sat a man hunched over a bookbinding cradle, threading a needle with calm precision. He didn't look up. "You're early," he said. I froze. "I don't think we had an appointment." "No," he said. "But grief always comes before the shop opens." His name was Tomas. Gray at the temples. Small spectacles perched low on his nose. He spoke softly, like someone who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Around him were tools that looked older than I was, bone folders, beeswax, brass rulers, a pot of glue that steamed gently like it was exhaling. "Ricardo sent me," I said. That made him smile. Barely. Of course he did. He fixes what moves. I fix what holds still. He waved a hand toward a stack of books beside him. These were damaged in a flood. Church library. Half of them will be lost. But this one. He lifted a waterlogged volume bound in leather. This one still remembers how to be read. He showed me the inside. The pages were warped, stained, but intact. The spine was gone. Mold in the headband. A lesser hand would have tossed it. But I stitched it back together. New thread. Old soul. How long have you done this? I asked. He looked up. Long enough to know that not everything broken wants to be saved. But some things do. And you can feel it if you're quiet enough. I sat down on the bench across from him, careful not to disturb anything. There was a kind of peace in the room, but not the sanitized kind. This was lived in peace. The kind that still had dust on it. Eventually, he asked what brought me to Lisbon. I hesitated. Then I told him. About Elizabeth. About the promise I made. About the compass around my neck and the notebook that still trembled when I tried to fill its pages. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't need to. Instead, he said, "Then your book is still being bound." He pulled a drawer open and took out a small cloth-bound journal, navy blue, hand-stitched, the corners slightly worn from waiting. "For your journey," he said, placing it in front of me. "It's empty now. But not blank. It already knows what it's for." I opened it. On the first page, in neat, inked lettering. "What we bind with care may someday outlive us." I swallowed hard. Slipped it into my jacket pocket like a gift too valuable to hold for long. We talked after that. About stories. About memory. About the quiet dignity of holding things together without needing applause. At one point, I mentioned a friend of mine, John, from back in New York. A fellow English major, poetic and chaotic in equal measure. He'd moved to Lisbon years ago to open a tiny publishing house. We'd only just reconnected over email. Tomas raised an eyebrow. "John, with the ink-stained cuffs and terrible handwriting?" I blinked. "You know him?" A grin, genuine this time, creased Tomas's face. "He's my nephew." "Wait, your nephew?" "Yes. He used to sit in that very chair when he was 10, pretending to be a poet while I stitched books. Always leaving ink fingerprints on my vellum. Said he wanted to publish stories that made people cry in public places." He chuckled softly. "So he opened a press instead of a bookstore. I told him that was the long way. He said it was the true way." That sounded like John. I smiled. "I've been meaning to visit him while I'm here. I wasn't sure when." Tomas stood and reached for a thick slip of hand-pressed paper from the counter. On it, an address and a time. "Tomorrow evening. He'll be there. He prints late. And pours wine even later." Before I left, I stood by the doorway for a long moment. The silence between us felt full, not awkward. Like a well-bound book, resting open on a desk. I looked at Tomas one last time. "Do you think I'll ever know when I've finished writing her story?" He didn't answer right away. Just brushed a thumb over the spine of the book he'd been working on. "When the binding feels strong enough to hold joy again," he said. "Not just memory." I stepped outside into a city that didn't feel so unfamiliar anymore. Sunlight was starting to creep into the cracks between the buildings. The tile on the opposite wall shimmered gold. And for the first time in days, I knew what my next step was. I was going to see John. Not just to say hello, but maybe, just maybe, to find a way to print something of my own. 5. Acquaintance with the third character, John, the printer. Later that same day, just before sunset, I followed Tomas's directions and walked across town toward the Barro Alto district. The streets grew narrower as I went, more alive. Strangers leaned out of windows to shake out rugs. Music spilled from second-floor balconies. The scent of grilled sardines and orange peel clung to the air like memory. I found the place at the bottom of a hill, an old corner building with peeling blue paint and a brass bell that sounded too elegant for such a modest door. A hand-lettered sign in the window read, Typographia Pequeña Voz, the Little Voice Press. Inside was a quiet hum, paper feeding through rollers, a clink of type, a kettle boiling somewhere in the back. It smelled like ink, wood smoke, and chamomile. A cat blinked at me from atop a stack of books. "Don't pet her," came a voice. "She's a tyrant." John. He stepped out from behind a partition, wiping his hands on a towel. A little older than I remembered, beard fuller, eyes heavier, but unmistakably him. The kind of man who always looked like he was halfway through a thought worth chasing. "William?" he said, as if he wasn't sure I was real. In the ink-stained flesh. I smiled. We hugged like people who'd been meaning to for years. We didn't waste time. We sat on crates beside the old press, mugs of tea steaming between us, and I told him everything. About Elizabeth. The promise. The cities. The people I'd met: Marcus, Deshawn, Camila, Mateo, Ana Luisa, Santiago. The compass. The notebook. I didn't cry. Not exactly. But something inside me softened in that room. And then I told him something I hadn't told anyone yet, not even Tomas. "I think I want to write a book," I said. "About her dream. And this journey. Not to explain it. Just to remember it. Honestly." John leaned back, hands laced behind his head. "You should. I've started already, without meaning to," I added. "Stories. Fragments. From the road. From the grief." His eyes lit up. "I've been working on a quarterly magazine," he said. "Short stories. Essays. Small truths from big hearts. Mostly poets, a few lost philosophers. I've got space in the next issue. Yours if you want it." I blinked. "Really?" He nodded. "And when you're ready, when you've wandered enough, we'll turn it into a book. Not for bestseller lists. Just something real. Bound the way it deserves to be. You write. I'll print." I smiled. "You sound like your uncle." "I know," he grinned. "It's terrifying." We stayed like that for a while, the sun fading out behind the shelves of type blocks and spools of thread. Then he stood up suddenly. "Come on. Let's walk. The city's just getting good." We wandered through the winding streets of the Barrow, past cafes lighting their lanterns, street musicians tuning guitars, old women hanging laundry on balconies like flags of forgotten countries. We didn't speak much at first. The quiet between us was old, comfortable. Eventually, as we stood on a viewpoint overlooking the river, he spoke. "I came here 6 years ago," he said. "Chased a woman. Stayed for the silence." "Still with her?" "No. But I stayed anyway." He told me about the early days, renting a one-room flat, building the press from flea markets and junkyards, burning through his savings faster than pages in a bad poem. But slowly, people found him. Writers with voices too soft for publishers. Translators chasing nuance. Readers tired of noise. "I just wanted to make space for the kind of words that don't shout," he said. "You know?" I nodded. "Elizabeth used to say the same thing. Some truths are so quiet, they need a soft room to be heard. That's why I called it the little voice." John continued. "It's what she called my writing once. You have a little voice that says big things. I like that. Even if she left." I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, I saw it. We were both chasing echoes. Him through paper. Me through memory. Both of us trying to make something stay, even if it couldn't. Before we parted ways, he gave me a key to the print shop. He said, "In case you ever need a place to write. Or just be." I held it in my hand a moment too long. "Thanks," I said. "Don't thank me," he replied. "Just write." We said goodbye without ceremony, just a long glance, a clasped shoulder, a shared understanding. As I walked back through the twilight streets, I felt something loosen. Not grief. Not yet. But maybe resistance. Maybe the part of me that had been afraid to turn her memory into something permanent. Now, I had a place to begin. A story to tell. and someone who believed it was worth reading. The next morning, I returned to the same cafe. Ordered coffee this time, strong, dark, honest. The table from the night before was still there. The second glass gone, but the river unchanged. I pulled out the navy notebook Tomas had given me, and I began. Not with the hospital. Not with the goodbye. But with the rooftop in Brooklyn. The mattress dragged up 5 flights. The bag of cherries. The Nina Simone playlist. Her laugh echoing against the night sky like it was too big to fit in a single life. I wrote slowly. Each word like a step through fog. But for the first time, I wasn't writing around the ache. I was writing with it. An hour passed. Maybe 2. Then the pages were full, and I closed the notebook gently, as if it were sleeping. I didn't know what came next, but my hands felt steadier. Later that afternoon, I set off through the winding streets near Kais du Soder, letting the rhythm of the city carry me. I had no plan. Just the notebook in my jacket and a mind still humming from the morning's writing. That's when I saw him. An old man crouched beside a cart whose wheel had snapped clean off, tools scattered around him, the cart full of coiled rope, fishing nets, and something that smelled unmistakably of the sea. He cursed under his breath in Portuguese, then English, then something older and salter than either. I walked over without thinking. Need a hand? He looked up, squinted at me, then nodded. Between the two of us, and a few improvised curses of my own, we managed to wedge the axle back in place and reattach the wheel. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Damn thing has more pride than sense. He grumbled, brushing off his palms. He introduced himself as Artur. 72. A sailor, by trade and by soul. His voice had the rasp of tidewater and pipe smoke. His hands looked like they'd spent a lifetime gripping rope and stories. Let me thank you, he said. You're hungry, I can tell. And I cook better than I curse. I hesitated. He laughed. I'm not a murderer, son. Just a man who's had too many dinners alone. So I followed him. His home was a narrow 2-room flat above a bakery, filled with maps, old compasses, faded photographs, and jars of preserved lemons and olives stacked like ships in a bottle. He made grilled sardines and boiled potatoes with garlic and oil. We ate by the open window, the breeze off the river fluttering the corners of an old nautical chart pinned to the wall. We talked. Or rather, he did. About storms off the Azores. About the stillness of midnight watches on calm seas. About ports that no longer exist. About a woman in Naples who once threw a shoe at him and later married him for 10 years. And then, more quietly, about Clara, his daughter. She was 12, he said. Leukemia. Fast. I was at sea when she got sick. I came home too late to hold her hand. He stared at the wall for a long time after that. I went back to the water, he said. Not because I wanted to leave, but because it was the only place quiet enough to let the grief speak. He poured us both a splash of homemade gin from a bottle with no label. I never stopped missing her, he said. But at some point I started missing myself, too. And that's when I came back. We drank in silence. And I realized something. Not all fathers become sailors. But many sailors are just fathers who lost someone too early, and went looking for the horizon to make sense of it. Before I left, he pressed a small, worn coin into my palm. Pick this up off the deck of a wreck in Mozambique, he said. Some say it's cursed. Others say it's blessed. I say it's yours now. I laughed. What if I don't believe in either? Then believe it means something because you touched it, he said. That's enough. As I stepped back into the Lisbon light, coin in one hand and notebook in the other, I thought of something Elizabeth once wrote in the margin of a book of poetry. The ocean doesn't care who you've lost, but it still sings like it does. And somewhere between Artur's story and my own, I felt the tide shift again, slowly, quietly, carrying me forward. The next morning, I returned to the cafe by the river one last time. I didn't bring the notebook. Just myself, a pen that had run out of ink, and a need to sit still for a while longer. Lisbon didn't feel like a transition anymore. It felt like a breath I'd been holding, finally released. That's when I noticed her. She was seated 2 tables down, sketching with her whole body. Not just her hand. Her shoulder moved in rhythm, her brow furrowed, her lips curved slightly, like the pencil was dancing with her instead of being led. She was drawing a lighthouse. The lines loose but alive. A wave crashing. A bird mid-wing. Nothing rigid. Everything in motion. Her hair was pinned up in a spiral, held with what looked like a sculpting tool. She wore oversized headphones around her neck and her shirt was streaked with blue and ochre paint. She had a travel mug covered in stickers. One said, "Speak with your hands." I leaned over, unable to help myself. "Is that the Felgueiras lighthouse?" She looked up, and smiled like I just said the secret word in some language we both used to speak. Her eyes were honey-colored. And steady. "You've been?" "Not yet," I said. "But I think I'm supposed to go." She laughed softly. I liked that answer. Her name was Clara. She spelled it out for me, like she'd had to 100 times. "My real name is Clara, but my friends call me Clara. It came from a child I used to teach who couldn't pronounce it. I liked it better anyway. Feels like a splash of water, doesn't it?" I nodded. "It suits you." She was a visual artist and movement therapist, splitting her days between street sketching, teaching creative workshops for neurodivergent kids, and working part-time with a marine biology team to document human interaction with coastal spaces. "I live between sketchbooks," she said, "and sometimes in other people's stories." She talked with her hands, paused to listen with her whole face, and tilted her head like she was always catching some faint, lovely sound no one else could hear. "I go to Felgueiras every year," she said, pointing at the sketch. "It's tradition. A wave and I made a deal once. I keep showing up. It keeps crashing." There was something magnetic about her, not in a romantic sense, not even flirtatious. Just alive. She wasn't carrying sadness in her eyes. No visible shadow. And somehow, that surprised me. I must have looked puzzled, because she leaned back and grinned. "Let me guess. You thought I'd be sad. Artists always are, right?" I blinked. "I didn't mean to assume." "It's okay," she said, matter of fact. "A lot of people do. But I'm not. I mean, I've had my chapters. We all do. But right now, I'm good. I'm happy, actually. Which feels radical sometimes. Happy. The word landed in me like something I hadn't heard in a long time. She kept talking, about the way the lighthouse makes her feel small and electric. About how she dances alone in its shadow at low tide. How it's not about ritual. It's about aliveness. It's where I go to remember that the world isn't here to heal me. It's here to meet me, exactly where I am. She looked at me again, curious this time. "You ever been somewhere that cracked you open without asking first?" I nodded. "I think I've been looking for that place." She smiled. "Come to Felgueiras then. Don't overthink it. It's not a sacred place. It's just stone. And salt. And sky. But sometimes that's enough." I hesitated, then realized I didn't want to. "I'll go." We made a plan to meet at the train station the next morning. Early. No pressure. No expectations. As she stood to leave, she pointed to my chest, where Elizabeth's compass rested beneath my shirt. "Whatever you're carrying," she said, "bring it. The wind up there doesn't judge." And with that, she walked away. Her steps light, like the world didn't owe her anything. And maybe that's why it seemed to give her so much. Lisbon gave me the courage to remember. To begin the book. To revisit our story without fear of erasing it. It gave me Ricardo, who showed me love that lingers through gestures. Tomas, who reminded me broken things can still be sacred. John, who offered me ink and room to speak. Arthur, who whispered that even sailors can come home again. And Clara, not a mirror of my grief, but a mirror of something I'd almost forgotten, joy without guilt. Stillness without sadness. That happiness doesn't have to be explained. She invited me not into her pain, but into her presence. And that was just as healing. Tomorrow, we go to Felguera's lighthouse. She says it's loud with sea and wind and truth. I believe her. And after that? Prague. But for now, the road bends north. To the water. To stone. To sky. To whatever crashes into me next.